Good afternoon, I'm Dennis Galucki, and welcome to the 531st Imagine Greater Buffalo program and our 153rd YouTube program hosted by our wonderful Buffalo and Erie County Public Library. Forgive the raspy voice, got a bit of a cold, and as such, we're so glad that you joined us today. This program is created by the Center for the Study of Art, Architecture, History, and Nature, or C-SAAHN, as I pronounce the acronym, and ImagineLifelongLearning.com. Now, before we get started, just a little housekeeping. Everyone watching will be muted and your video turned off. If you do have a question or comment, please type it into the chat box, and we'll go through them at the end of the presentation. We are recording this program, so you can watch it again later on the Downtown Central Library's Facebook page and YouTube channels. And please, we hope you share the link with others. Now, on to our two featured speakers. Bill Nowak was the founding executive director of the New York Geothermal Energy Organization, also known as NY-GEO, from 2014 to 2022, and is currently a board member. N.Y-GEO is a nonprofit organization representing geothermal heat pump installers, manufacturers, distributors, general contractors, engineers, renewable energy consultants, and industry stakeholders from throughout New York State. And from 2009 to 2010, he was the director of policy research for the New York State Senate Environmental Conservation Committee. Reverend Dr. Majadi Baruti is a longtime community organizer and activist with 35 years of work in racial, immigrant, and housing justice, as well as the environmental and climate justice arenas. Reverend Baruti is the climate justice organizer at Push Buffalo, a community organization that mobilizes residents to create strong neighborhoods with quality and affordable housing, expand local hiring opportunities, and advance economic justice in Buffalo. Now, that's a mouthful. And now it's time to hear from our two speakers, Bill Nowak and Reverend Dr. Majadi Baruti. Take it away, guys.
Thanks so much, Dennis. The Reverend Doctor and I are going to go back and forth. I'm going to start. I wanted to start, though, by thanking you for this public service. This is an amazing thing you've been doing for these past several years, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
You know, it's hard to hold the climate emergency in our heads. Our minds naturally want to escape to something more pleasant or promising than the stress of deadly and disruptive climate extreme weather events increasing year over year. No one likes looking at the suffering that comes with destabilizing our climate. This is especially so because the solutions need to be powerful enough to counteract worldwide trends, and we often feel powerless. But I'd like to try to bring it home for you. I'm going to give credit to this exercise to Mark Talley. He's the son of Geraldine Talley, who was murdered in the May 14th Tops Massacre. And Mark took us through this exercise in a program at the Albright Knox Art Gallery a couple of weeks ago when they opened an exhibit on the Tops Massacre. And I want you to picture your favorite elderly friend, whether that's, I'm going to use the example of a grandmother. You can picture whoever you want in this. But it's Christmas 2022, and the bomb cyclone, which we all remember, has arrived. But Grandma needs medicine. Grandpa walks or even drives to the drugstore. And I know when I was in this incredible cyclone that was happening, I walked 5 houses down my street, and it felt dangerous walking into that blizzard of wind. I don't know if I could have made it 5 blocks to the local Rite Aid. But imagine that that's what your grandfather is trying to do. And imagine that he was one of the 37 people who died outdoors during that storm, freezing to death. Imagine what was going through his mind when he realized he might not make it back home. Imagine the panic your grandmother would feel as the hours passed, and the pain when she learns of his death. Imagine that pain reverberating through your family. Now, picture your favorite toddler or grade school child playing outside last summer when the skies were tinted orange from Canadian wildfires. The air was heavy with invisible small particles of soot that were entering his or her still developing lungs. Now picture that child when he or she gets to be their 30s with lung cancer or emphysema that started on a day of innocent play in the summer of 2023. This is what we're facing. By burning fossil fuels, humans have created a blanket made of greenhouse gases in the Earth's atmosphere that keeps heat from escaping into space at a normal rate. It's a blanket that won't break down for centuries, and we're adding a new layer to that blanket every year we keep burning fossil fuels. And Buffalo is supposed to be a climate oasis. You know, we're next to bountiful fresh water from Lake Erie, a place where we could actually use some warmer weather. Yet in just 9 months, we had these 2 catastrophic climate events. But yeah, things are far worse in much of the world. Droughts, wildfires, deadly heat waves, flooding, resulting in social chaos and people becoming climate refugees. Dr. Baruti will move us into the solutions, but first I wanted to give a quote from Bill McKibben, who wrote the first major book on global warming back in the 1980s. We know from a recent study that every 1/10 of a degree in temperature rise that we prevent keeps 140 million of our brothers and sisters in habitable zones on this planet. And nothing has changed my basic conviction about the key. We need to keep building huge movements to finally break the political power of the fossil fuel industry and force the emergency conversion to clean energy. Dr. Baruti?
Thank you, Bill, for that. That was moving. And every time I hear you discuss the seriousness on the bodies of our folk, I really pivoted towards this understanding of how emotionally damaging the climate crisis has been, how spiritually upsetting it has been for people. I've been here now, actually, as of yesterday, in the state of New York for now 1 year. And I started Push Buffalo last year on the 21st of this month. And in this year, I've seen some of the most beautiful geography of a city. And I'm seeing some of the most beautiful people I've ever seen in the Buffalonians. I'm going to give a little bit of history, just a little tiny bit. And I'm a historian, so I could do this all day, but I'm not going to do that. A little bit of the history of Push Buffalo. Push Buffalo has been engaged in the fight dealing with the fossil fuel industry for some years now. This specific work that I've been engaged in for the last year deals with National Fuel Gas as a fossil fuel company, as a utility company. These have to be tied together. Fossil fuel industry, utilities, these are one and the same. This fight was over the spring, the summer, fall, and it was to stop National Fuel Gas's 3rd presentation of a long-term plan that they're obligated to submit that says that they're going to begin to move us all to a safer and cleaner energy a set of sources, right? The plans that they've submitted don't even come close to complying with what is required of them of law. And I want people to really grasp that. The Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, the CLCPA, or the climate law, like we've been generically calling it, was passed in 2019. So this is a law. And if those of you who have some understanding that if I were to break the law, they would pick the jail up and put it on top of me. Okay, so really understand what's happening. They are bending the reality and they're twisting and turning reality to skirt this law that New Yorkers put into play in 2019. We've asked the Public Service Commission to not say yes to this plan. That plan so far has been kind of kicked down the road by the Public Service Commission with some caveats of adjusting for National Fuel Gas to make another plan and to submit that so that it will start leaning in and becoming the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act will start being in attunement with that climate law. But again, it's been kicked down the can and kicked down the road, as the saying goes, by the Public Service Commission, and that is very unfortunate. We are suspect as to whether or not the CLCPA will be followed by National Fuel Gas. There have been some more complex things around gaslighting us, around the cleanliness of natural gas and that type of thing, but we're not going to get into that. As of late, last year, October, National Fuel Gas submitted a request to state utility regulators, the PSC, the Public Service Commission, to raise the gas delivery rates 29.3%. For some of us, that will raise our bills some $140 for an annual bill. Now, for some of us, that's not, that doesn't mean anything, but it is very problematic. It will exacerbate an existing energy and housing affordability crisis. It will cause more harm to those Western New Yorkers who reside in communities that were actually never invested in such that their housing lacks energy efficiency. And I really want to make that differentiation. People say that these Black, brown, and immigrant communities were disinvested in, and we have to correct the history. They were never invested in the first place. So we have people living in what we call at Push Buffalo, Swiss cheese housing that lacks energy efficient. I live in a home in which my gas bill, even though I am of a class where I can pay it to an extent, it has been very difficult. I've had to make some decisions as to medicine, food, bill, this type of thing. We shouldn't be forced into that construct. We have some solutions. One is that we're calling for our community to oppose the rate hike. We also have another solution to help communities to be able to save some money and to be able to protect themselves against what is really, in actuality, a very dangerous gas system. And we're going to discuss that in just a moment. Bill?
Thank you. Let me share my screen here. I'm going to take us back and talk a little bit about the CLCPA, which Reverend Doctor mentioned. It's a bill. It was a grassroots initiative. It's our bill. It's the community bill. It was passed in 2019, and it's got some bottom lines. We need a 40% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, and we're required to come up with an 85% reduction by 2050. We need to have 100% emission-free electricity by 2040. And at least 35% of these investments need to go to disadvantaged communities. Now, there was a council that was set up, a Climate Action Council of 22 members. Many of them were state government agency heads, and several were appointees from the legislature, including the 2 to 3 from fossil fuel interests. Disclosure, I was a member of the Housing and Energy Efficiency Advisory Panel, along with Dr. Baruti's colleague, Clark Gawker from Push Buffalo. There was a climate justice working group that was a strong part of this, that identified disadvantaged communities that need to get this investment. And the final scoping plan was released in January of 2023. Now, to take you, kind of into what the picture is that they looked at, this was the amount of greenhouse gas emissions in 1990 at over 400 tons. It has been reduced to some extent between then and when the plan came out in 2019, but it needs to reduce drastically between now and 2030, and even more drastically between now and 2050. And to give you a sense of where the emissions come from in New York State, the two major sectors are buildings and transportation, with heating being the primary source of emissions in buildings. People often think that generating electricity is the big thing. It's important that we knock back the emissions from generating electricity, but getting transportation and buildings in line is what we absolutely need to do if we're going to reach our goals. Now, there were strategies released in the plan, and this is the kind of overall summary. Energy efficiency measures, transition from fossil fuels to electrification. We have to stop burning fossil fuels in our buildings, zero emissions electricity, and the electrification of transportation. Now they did a benefit cost assessment. They looked at 3 different scenarios for getting to these goals, and all of them showed substantial savings between the climate, avoiding climate destruction, that's the orange, and green is health benefits. You know, as we breathe in the result of burning fossil fuels, it hurts health and it costs us money. So, you know, when people talk about what's this all going to cost, we have to look at the benefits as well as that. And there's going to be a substantial cost. We're going to really need to identify resources to move us forward. So they're looking at 100,000 jobs being created in energy efficiency and clean energy for buildings alone as part of this plan. And this is a quote from the plan: decarbonization is feasible, but it requires action in all sectors of the economy, including critical investments from New York State. Approximately 1 to 2 million efficient homes will need to be electrified with heat pumps by 2030. So we've taken some baby steps on this plan. Last year, there was a bill passed called the All Electric Building Act, which requires that new buildings are not going to be having fossil fuels in them. This is a very successful and relatively easy strategy with the sector of new buildings. This year, we have a bill called New York Heat that's going to stop us from digging deeper into the climate hole we're in. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to the Reverend Doctor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bill. I appreciate that. And we're going to cover a little bit here. So we at Push Buffalo, we are joining our allies at New York Renews in Albany, New York on tomorrow. And we'll be pushing primarily for what is called the New York Heat Act. It's one part of a very urgent call for our legislators to enact all parts of the CLCPA fully. We want all of them pushed forward, but there are 3 works we're trying to get passed as part of the Climate Jobs and Justice Package. One is called the Climate Change Superfund Act. Another is the Just Energy Transition Act. But right here and right now, for the sake of time, we'll focus on the New York Heat Act. It is an act that once it is fully implemented, it starts to pull us away from the seeming necessity to rely on this gas system, which I have some pictures and a little video. It is very dangerous. In effect, I have said this before, and I've been hesitating to say this. It's as if Western New York is sitting on sort of not only a problematic and leaky system, but in effect, it is a bomb. I have seen explosions in other cities like Birmingham, Alabama, and things of that. It's a very dangerous and shaky system that we're sitting on. So we're focused on the New York Heat Act. If it's implemented in its full, it'll pull us away from those types of systems and moves us towards some other dynamics. Key portions of it were included in Governor Kathy Hochul's budget proposal released last month, and it would ensure an affordable and equitable transition off of fossil fuels by ending our consumer subsidized expansion of a very costly and dangerous fracked gas system. So New York State is currently considering the New York Heat Act, and we will be joining New York Renews and several of our allies. It's going to be quite a bunch of us. We're hoping to get about 600 of us, and we're going to be pushing and lobbying to try to get folks to move us towards this legislation. It is very ambitious, but it would pave the way for the state's buildings, New York State's buildings, to transition from fossil fuels to electric heating based on what has been proven in many cities across the United States and some other countries as well, to be a very safe form of electric heating. The New York Heat Act also aims to alleviate New York's energy affordability crisis. The bill creates a goal for the state to ensure that no household pays more than 6% of their annual income on gas and electric bills. And we'd have to ask the question, how many of Erie County's residents are highly energy burdened today? About 1 in 4, 24%. Erie County residents have a high energy burden. They pay more than 6% of their annual income on electricity, natural gas, and delivered fossil fuels. If New York Heat Act were enacted, that 24% of the Erie County's households with high energy burdens could see their energy bills cut just about in half, with an average of $109 per month. Back to you, Bill.
So we do want to leave time for questions. I'm going to put this link in the chat. If folks are interested in learning more, the link will take you to this diagram, and you can click on a video, you can click on information, and you can get in touch with your legislators. Anybody who thinks this is important and would like to take this to the legislature, we encourage you to do so. And I'm going to leave both my email and the Reverend Doctor's email as well. We welcome comments and conversation after this. But at this point, let's open this up to questions.
That's most appropriate. Thank you, guys. It's a complex issue, to be sure. Debated, different views. Help me with this one. Most of us have heard how we need energy today. You don't just flip a switch and it's all fixed. You get there from point A to point B. And National Fuel and all gas companies would say they are that transition. How do you refute that and know that what I plan to do is next fall is invite somebody from National Fuel to help explain their side of the coin? But what are your observations? What's wrong with their argument?
I could start, and I think what was not recognized for a long time with when people saw natural gas as a bridge fuel is the fact that natural gas is primarily methane, and methane is 80 times more damaging to the climate than carbon dioxide is. There's been a big focus on carbon dioxide emissions. So all along the production process and the distribution process, this methane is leaking directly into the atmosphere, adding to this blanket. And folks who have looked closely at this see this as being a major part of the climate destruction that's happening currently, and something that we really cannot afford to continue using. You know, it burns relatively cleanly, relative to coal maybe, and relative to oil. But if you count in all the emissions that happen in producing and using natural gas, it's almost as bad as coal.
All right, Allison, do we have, I'm sorry, go ahead, Doctor.
No, I was just looking at, I was going to address the question that it kind of adds on to what Bill is saying. There's a question in the chat. What are the main sources of clean electricity and development that will replace natural gas for heating? Here at Push Buffalo, they are actually, and we are been for years now, implementing certain projects. I'm actually looking across the street. You can't see that, but I'm looking across the street where people are using dynamics like geothermal, which Bill is more proficient in, solar, wind turbine. There's plenty of ways to do this from a community perspective, where the community has a say in how that looks. And maybe, Bill, you can run into how geothermal could replace natural gas for heating.
Well, certainly, but you know, particularly in terms of where's the energy going to come from, it's important to know that upstate New York has the cleanest electricity in the nation. And downstate New York is being addressed at this point largely through offshore wind, but also through solar and onshore wind. There is a plan for getting us there, and we need to overcome the NIMBYism that is kind of in the way of that plan. But certainly the building that the Reverend Doctor is referring to is on West Street, and it's a wonderful example that Push has developed of housing, multi-family, all different income levels housing that doesn't use a drop of fossil fuel. It's the heating and cooling system is a geothermal system. It has solar. It's a self-sufficient building, and this is the way we need to go in the future and starting now.
Any other questions, Allison, or comments?
There's one more question. Is there an email template that people can send to their legislators?
If I could, the item that's up here, if you click this link and then go to this link on that picture, all you need to do is click there, and it will identify who your legislators are and send a message to those legislators, plus the head of the assembly and the governor. So thanks for that question. I hope it's really clear. If anybody has trouble doing that, please send me a message and I'll make sure you get set up.
Anything
Those
else?
Those were the only two in the chat.
Let's continue the conversation a bit. The stars aligned, you would think, with a governor certainly having empathy for a goal, a state goal of 30% reduction by 2030, that sort of thing. Is there a sense of buy-in by especially independent-minded people living in the countryside that like to be self-sufficient and whatnot? Doesn't this appeal to them, I would think, to have your own geothermal, your own energy sources? Just your thoughts.
If I could, I can address this from the position of being a farmer who is descendant of farmers. Farmers are probably one of the best sets of scientists, urban and rural farmers, to determine what is happening with the climate and what they need to grow their crops, the food for their family, take care of their animals if they deal with animals, this type of thing. They are full on just about everywhere I see. They are, unless they're like one of these massive companies, you know, they have some pushback on these things, but the smaller farmers, urban and rural, are really pro these ideas. And so, yes, they have good buy-in to this. It is difficult for them often to get into some of the conversations around legislation and things of that nature because of their proximity, you know, to Albany or other state capitals. But they are there. They are present. Farmers are very much present in the climate and climate justice movement.
That's good to hear. The bush buffalo is just really a shining example of a community doing the theme that this program is based on. There's two themes, but one of them, my primary theme, is to imagine a healthy, wealthy, and sustainable community. And Push Buffalo has been really taking a lead, certainly on the west side, to develop just something like that. Home equity increases with values of housing that goes up and is livable housing. So my hat's off to the organization. Did you want to comment any further on the organization itself?
Say that last part one more time. I'm sorry.
Of what Push Buffalo has done for this community. I know you're here only for the last year, but what's your observation coming new into the Push Buffalo realm?
Oh, well, because I understand the importance of land and home in other spaces of organizing and activism I've done, the connection between even the word economy means to take care of home, right? So when we talk about the economy, some people talk about Dow Jones and all that. That's not what economy is. It's actually taking care of home and community. That is what it is. And this is, in my opinion, one of the most community-centered dynamics I've ever seen in nonprofit work. And I've done a lot of nonprofit work, and this is very centered in the community. We have our elders, the youth, and that's who's going to be going with me on this bus on tomorrow to Albany to fight for the New York Heat Act, as well as the full of the CLCPA. And so, yeah, this, and we have several allies. There are allies that are dealing with urban agriculture, and I want to reach out to them for them to come forward. I'm starting to make some outreach to churches, masjids. So this is a community perspective. This work is community centered, and that's really actually the only way that it's going to work. Even the idea of solar, we're looking at community and collectively owned solar and public utilities in general. The community can own that part.
Well, good luck with that. Any closing comments, Bill?
I did want to make one, which is we have a rare opportunity to say thank you. I know when people call elected officials, it's usually to complain, but if your legislator is John Rivera or Tim Kennedy, both of them have been sponsors of this New York Heat Act and have pushed it in the budget process So, if you do go and either send a letter or call their offices, you get a chance to say thank you instead of just complaining. And they really need to hear that. They're getting bombarded by robocalls from the fossil fuel interests. And if you want to call John Rivera's office, his number is 985-7001. And it would be great if he could hear from folks there.
Good way to finish. Good way to finish. Guys, thank you for the good work you do and the community involvement that you've had for both of you for several years. And welcome to town, Dr. Majadi Baruti.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Bill, your work is well, as long as I've known you, you've been an active ingredient. So thanks for being part of the Imagine program. And folks, thank you. Next week, we're going to be thinking about our total solar eclipse, which will be coming up very quickly after next Tuesday. And we have Holly Schreiber. Now she's the Buffalo Museum of Science, the person in charge of the telescope in that area. So we're going to be learning more about our upcoming total solar eclipse on April 8th. Hope you can join us then. I'm Dennis Galucki. Be well and good day.